Hi, my name is Jacqueline, and I am basically asking you to do something. I want you to sign a petition asking that JDRF accept the findings of the National Institute on Health that type 1 diabetes and type 1 brittle diabetes are two separate diseases. That type 1 brittle diabetes is actually a very rare and very aggressive complex disease. If you go online right now and you type up brittle type 1 diabetes, you're going to end up on a lot of websites that are going to talk about how brittle diabetes happens when people aren't properly adhering to their diet, to their insulin regimens, to medications, etc. It'll also seem like they will imply that it's totally reversible, and that with simple tightening up and more discipline on how you medically care for yourself, that it can be reversed and disappear. The thing about that is that we know that is incorrect. There have been several studies, I can think of at least 4 in the last 3 years, that have shown a couple of things. One, that brittle type 1 diabetes has an incredibly high mortality rate. There are only 3,000 to 4,000 estimated living brittle type 1 diabetics in this country right now. Within a decade of diagnosis, almost half of them are gone. Well, over half of them actually. And then you go 25 years later, guess what? Less than 1% are alive. I was diagnosed as brittle from the start. As a small child, I became very sick very quickly, and I remember my mom telling me that the doctors knew what was wrong and that we had to get to the hospital, and then I was in a hospital gown and there were tubes everywhere and I was being stuck, and I remember the coma. But anyways, it's pretty much unheard of to be in my situation. We have tried everything, and nothing has worked, which is not all that surprising, because what we have discovered is that type 1 brittle diabetes can be managed by things like islet cell transplant therapy and by insulin pumps with continuous glucose monitoring systems in them. However, these things are very expensive. So while they are accessible to you if you're a type 1 diabetic under the Medi-Cal or Medicaid program, and typically you are this type 1 diabetic who is either 1, pregnant, 2, you're in a diabetic coma, or 3, you have begun to suffer renal failure. Then they'll let you have this pump. Most insurance carriers, I mean, it costs thousands of dollars out of pocket to just have this equipment. But it has been proven to show a difference in brittle type 1 diabetics. And right now I weigh my food. I have a food log. I test my blood sugar every other hour. I am, at my county hospital for different doctor's visits at least once a week. We know I'm doing everything possible. We've tried everything possible. My doctor has, she has put in a request of Medi-Cal to allow me to have an insulin pump with a CGM twice now. And twice I have not been approved for it. Now, she keeps telling me to be patient, and that as things progress, they will change their mind. It's her way of giving me a pep talk. But this pep talk basically means when I'm in kidney failure, when I get sick and end up in a coma, then somebody might help me. My small intestine is destroyed from this disease. There is very little that I can consume. My stomach is destroyed from the nerve damage there as well, and I can't even tolerate water. Last year, I went from a diagnosis of background diabetic retinopathy, which does cause blindness, but it's manageable, to, a month ago, a diagnosis of proliferative diabetic retinopathy. What this means is I am going blind, and my kidney proteins continue to increase. I have lived long after the typical life expectancy for someone like me, but I didn't have to end up in this position. If type 1 diabetes and type 1 brittle diabetes are finally acknowledged as two separate diseases, people like me, we will get the insulet transplant therapy immediately. Medi-Cal, Medicaid would have no question about giving me an insulin pump with this continuous monitor if type 1 brittle diabetes was seen as a separate disease from type 1. For type 1 diabetics everywhere, this also means better research, clearer information. Finally, a way to create a vaccine for type 1 diabetes, a way to better manage type 1 diabetes. But we have to get my group, the ones who do not respond the same, the ones who a lot of research has discovered that this is not happening through any fault of our own. The only way that we can be saved is by you. A lot of people tell me that I'm strong, but I think strength is when you stand up for the person that you don't have to stand up for. I think it's when you share a video that might make some people uncomfortable, and you do it for a selfless reason. You listening to this video, watching, signing the petition and sharing it, that's strong and that's brave. And I really need your courage. The damage I have is permanent, but by simply doing those things, you could be saving a brittle type 1 diabetic who has not had permanent damage yet. And what an incredible gift of strength that would be.